Because you're here looking at me right now, I know that you're considering embarking on a really unusual course, an extensive course, the most extensive course I know of about parenting, a course on ridiculously effective parenting. Because this is a really big step for you and because it's an extensive training, I'm going to really take my time introducing you to it before you make a commitment to it. It's going to be unusual. It's going to be a little longer than most introductions to a course for two reasons. One, I'm introducing you to a subject of inexpressible importance. I'm not here to teach you how to dance or to sell you a tool or an herbal product. I'm here to thoroughly introduce you to a subject that will change your life as well as the lives of your children. No playing around with this. Two, I'll be doing far more than simply telling you about this course on ridiculously effective parenting. We're actually starting the course. You'll see exactly what the rest of the course will be like, because although we'll call this, for lack of a better term, the sales page, the introduction to you before you make a commitment, it's really the chapter before chapter 1, which follows. I guess that would make this chapter 0. In fact, the introduction you just saw right before this, where I said that we don't know how to unconditionally love our children, and at the end of that page, you clicked to get here, that's also part of the course too. There's a lot of material there. We'll call that, the first thing that you saw, the landing page. So we've got the landing page, which you've already seen. We've got the sales page, which we're on right now, which is really chapter 0, and then we'll begin the course on chapter 1. So let's go. A friend of mine recently told me about how years ago he took guitar lessons. And on the first lesson, his teacher asked, "Do you want to learn to play the guitar, or do you want to learn just to play a couple of pieces on the guitar for fun and, for your friends, a little show off and a little entertainment for yourself?" My friend told his teacher, "I want to learn to play a couple of pieces." So he did. The teacher taught him a couple of pieces, but he never played them very well because he hadn't learned the foundations of music and the many essential techniques involved in playing a guitar correctly. And he didn't play for long because he didn't really know how to play the guitar. All because of the choice he made. I just want to learn a couple of pieces. Right now, I'm asking you a similar question about parenting. 1, do you want to learn the right words to say in a couple of difficult situations with your children, like my friend wanted to play a couple of pieces? Now, that's tempting because you got a whining, smart-mouthed, disrespectful, angry, demanding, entitled child, and you just want the right words to say to make that stop. Do you want to manage or reduce a particular behavior, like addictions to phone, screens, alcohol, drugs, sex? Again, tempting. Every parent asks me this question, or a variation on this question. How do I get my child to, or more frequently, how do I get my child to stop whatever? Some of those things that I just listed. Children can make you crazy. And sometimes you just want to weave a spell. You just want to wave a wand and make a particular behavior stop. That's one question, similar to my friend who was asked, do you want to just learn to play a couple of pieces? Or 2, do you want to learn to be a ridiculously effective parent in everything? All the time, overall, in all situations, and with all the difficulties that can come up with children. That's choice number 2. In other words, do you want to really learn to play the guitar? If you want number 1, clever little responses and how to stop a particular behavior, turns out you can get this almost always. You can stop the behaviors that make you crazy, but not in the ways you think. I could teach you the right words, it might work for a brief period of time, but not well, and certainly not long. For example, I can give you the right words to say, words that have proven to work in pretty much any situation you can imagine, because I've pretty much encountered every situation you can imagine, not kidding. And you could deliver those words to your child precisely. And one, that might work temporarily, but not for long, which is just more frustration. Or two, the right words, even though they're the words that have proven to be effective, wouldn't work. That's a more likely outcome because you wouldn't have a grasp of the underlying principles of parenting in your mind, like my friend who didn't really learn to play the guitar, nor would you have the underlying strength and love yourself to deliver these right words in a way that your child would hear them. I will be addressing a great number of specific problems during this training, but primarily I'll be teaching you how to love and teach your children in all circumstances. It is crazy effective, not joking. As you learn to do what your children need and what you need, you'll also tend to get, not 100% of the time, but it's a strong tendency for you to get what you want, which is to be happy yourself and to eliminate that behavior. But the goal can't be to eliminate the behavior. The goal has to be to love and teach your children. In the process, the behavior goes away. You couldn't have noticed this yet, but I'm not pitching you on this parenting training, even though in the future I will be calling this chapter now the sales page. I'm not selling you on what we're going to do. Actually, we've already begun the training. This is the first class. I'm already showing you what the training will be like. I'm also using approaches with you that will benefit you as an individual and as a parent, and that will benefit your children as you teach all this to them. You're going to see better and better, line by line, minute by minute, what I'm saying right now. I will identify these approaches and principles as we go. In this chapter, the sales page, chapter 0, and in future ones, we've begun the training and we'll be archiving or including what I'm saying now as part of the training so that you can see it again and again. Every time you see or listen to what I'm saying, it will mean more to you. You'll be able to use it better. I can summarize the entire training, the entire ridiculously effective parenting training in a single sentence. Although at this point you won't quite get what it means. That's okay. You can look forward to this. The primary guiding principles of parenting are loving and teaching. Wow. No 12 steps, no 25 steps, no cleverness. No, it's really pretty simple. Love them and teach them. Now, what kind of loving am I talking about? As I mentioned in the landing page that you saw before this, unconditional love is the only kind of love that will nourish and fill and make happy the lives of your children. It's the only kind of love that is love. Everything else isn't. We may call other things love, but they're not. I talked about in the last chapter, the landing page, how we don't love them unconditionally and how the lack of that causes all the problems of our children. Sounds oversimplified. It's not. In unconditional love, or what I call real love, to distinguish it from everything that's, well, not real, there is no disappointment or impatience or irritation or anger, and for emphasis again, no disappointment. because we use that so often. Unconditional love never involves this, which children get to hear, who knows how many times a day. It's the only kind of love that counts. If children have it, if they have unconditional love, they will be happy. No kidding. Not oversimplified. If they don't have it, it's painful. It creates a gaping, intolerable emptiness in them, and then they will act out in a wide variety of ways. Anger, cutting, use of drugs, use of screens, electronic devices, it goes on and on. They have to act out because they have to do something to diminish their pain. What I'll be teaching you as we talk about any problem or life skill is how to love and teach your children everything they need to utterly change their lives. And in the process, you will change yours. Yes, I will be using examples of specific problem solving, which you will find enormously helpful. The words to say, what to do when a kid does whatever. But primarily, I'll be using problems to illustrate the use of these more important and underlying principles of parenting. Let me show you an example of what I mean, because in the beginning, this is hard to conceptualize. I emphasize strongly that this is just one example of many principles I'll be teaching. But you need to see how one thing can work, which gives you hope that other things can work. You'll see how this works, and it will weave together into you becoming a ridiculously effective parent. A woman called me, and she said, quote, as I read and listen in the reallove.com website, I'm beginning to see that there are so many things I need to learn as a parent. I feel a little overwhelmed. Like, yeah, no kidding. Can you give me one thing that I could do right now that would make the biggest difference in my family? Now, before I answer her, a word about the word overwhelmed. Parenting is an unspeakably important and huge responsibility. There are millions of things to know and to do. We just can't possibly do all of them. It's reasonable that this woman and you would say, help, and to ask, come on, give me one thing. Show me that there's at least one thing I could do so that this didn't seem so overwhelming. Because when we feel overwhelmed, we just give up. We just quit altogether, and then we lose. Breathe. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help you as a parent. I've done this before thousands of times. We can do this. It's going to be you and me working with your kids. Now, back to her question about one thing to do, which is, keep in mind, just one thing. It's not the thing. It's an important thing, yes, but not the only thing. I responded to her when she asked about the one thing. I said, easy. If I had to pick one, no whining or anger. None. Now, many of you are thinking right now that in your family, no, that says in zero, not less. No whining and no anger would be A, a dream come true, and B, impossible. Past impossible. I promise you that it's not. In fact, maintaining no whining or anger is easier than dealing with the endless effects of whining and anger. Take a look around your family at the effects. Think, once it gets going, the whining, it becomes a fire that just infects everything and seems to have no end. I'm sure you have had days where you think, if I hear one more whine, I'm going to shoot somebody. It has that serious an effect. So let go of your doubts for just a moment. You got nothing to lose. and keep following me. So first, back to the mother who called me. I said, whining and anger are closely related, but for simplicity, let's just deal with one of the two right now. We can get to anger later. Let's just talk about whining. I had spoken to her before, so she knew that I was referring kind of more specifically or especially to one of her children. I said, let's talk about Billy. She said, I don't think he whines as much as you think. I couldn't help but laugh. I said, I'm on Skype with you right now, so I can hear what's happening all around you. You stop and listen to Billy in the next room. Up to that point, she wasn't even hearing him. Well, she was paying attention to me, and she couldn't even hear him. I could. I said, listen to him talking to his sister. Can you hear him now? She said, well, yeah, and? Like, what's unusual about that? I smiled and said, well, he's whining right now. He whines all day long. And you just told me he doesn't whine as much as I think. She said, well, but you can't even hear what he's saying. He's not whining. I don't need to hear what he's saying, I said. It's not about the words. Whining is an attitude. It's a tone of voice. Doesn't matter what the words are. And it's unmistakable. You can hear a whine through four walls. It's like screaming or barking. It's that distinctive. Remember, I'm trying to help you learn something here. I'm not asking you if he's whining. I'm telling you that what he's doing is whining to help you, not to accuse you of anything. Then I mimicked her son's tone of voice. In other words, I whined. And I asked her, if I used that tone of voice while talking to you, would you think that I was speaking like a sensible and happy person, or would I be whining? To her everlasting credit, this woman did not defend herself, which most people do. That is the beginning of learning. When we as parents recognize, I haven't been paying attention to that, or I've been doing that wrong, or I've been ignoring that behavior. She looked thoughtful for a moment and she said, oh my goodness, he whines all the time then. He never stops whining. Yes, I said, that's right. You haven't recognized it because he does it so often that it's become normal to you and to him. Even worse, you're not going to like this part, you taught him to whine. He's learned that if he doesn't get what he wants, he just turns up the volume on the whining until he does get what he wants. It's just like training a seal. Throw the seal a fish when he balances a ball or claps his flippers for spontaneously for whatever reason. But he claps his flippers and you throw him a fish and he goes, well, cool, I like this. I clap my flippers and I get a fish. So he starts clapping his flippers on a certain command because you give him a fish and he'll keep doing it. Billy has learned that when he whines, you'll throw him a fish. In other words, you'll give him what he wants. So he keeps doing it. You've trained him to whine. I know, unbelievable. You're wondering, why does this kid whine? You. He has also trained you that if you give him what he wants, you get the quiet you want. He throws you a fish. I know, it's ridiculous and a little embarrassing, but true. He's trained you. So you keep giving him what he wants after a lot of whining. You give him what he wants, he gives you what you want. A little peace and quiet. It's a nice little trade, but it's death. And if he grows up and he continues to whine, I can promise you that his future partner is really not going to be entertained by his whining, just like you aren't now. So he is both seal and trainer, and so are you. You're training each other. So she said, well, What can I do about this mess? Because it certainly is a mess after all these years. Stop rewarding him. It's that simple. No more fish. No more rewards. You have to stop manipulating him to give you fish too. But that's another subject. We'll get to that later. So stop rewarding his whining. Stop giving him fish right now. Now, what would that look like? Like, to be really specific, practical. From now on, if Billy whines for anything, any whining, it's not okay if he whines 10% of his usual. Nope. If there's any whining at all, you have to stop everything that you're doing. If you're on the road, you pull the car over. If you're cooking, you turn off the stove and you go to where he's whining. And you explain to him what he's doing. Notice, I just didn't say tell him to stop it. You teach him. Remember? Love and teach. Well, where's the love? Well, when you go to talk to him, you don't go to him with that usual, I'm not even going to simulate it because it's awful looking, that scowl on your face when he whines. He knows that scowl perfectly. You know the scowl too. You've just gotten used to it. You have a frown on your face. You look disappointed and irritated when he's whining. And when you go finally to talk to him, all you're going to do is scare him. All he's going to hear is, I don't love you. You're going to go calmly and explain something. The calmly is the loving part. So you're loving and teaching already. Here we've just started this chapter 0 and you've learned something. How do you love and teach? Go and talk to Billy calmly and explain what he's doing, because he is as blind to what he's doing as you are. Nobody is conscious of all this actually awful mess. Mimic the sound that he was making. So you say, I'm going to give you the words. Billy, look at me. Because he'll always be doing something else. He might be fighting with his sister. He might be on an electronic device. You put it down. You tell his sister to go swim in the swimming pool. And you say, look at me. And then you mimic the sound he was just making. You whine. And you explain that whine is a language. If he's old enough to whine to get what he wants, if he's already manipulating you, he'll understand this. Whine is a language, and you're not going to speak that language anymore in your home. Whine has been outlawed. It's done. It's dead. Not less whining. No more whining. All you're going to speak is English. If your native language at home is something else, then use that language. Then you illustrate to him what not whining would look like, because he's always whining to get something. So you show him in English. I would like this, or I would like this to stop. You show him. See, there's no stop it. There's no tone of voice on your part. There's no lecturing him. There's no anger. There's nothing. There's loving and teaching. That's all. This is whine over here. That's what that sounds like. And this is what it would look like if you wanted to get what you're saying with your whining in English. And then you say to him, from now on, like now, not later, this is the cutoff point. I will listen only to English. I will not listen to whine. I will listen to English, but not whine. Really simple. Parenting is not complicated. We just didn't know how to do it. And so we make it complicated. You explain that if he does whine, you will simply say to him one word. You will say, well, two. Billy, English. Now, did you hear my tone of voice? That's why video is so much more effective than a book. You can hear the tone. If you walk into the next room and he's whining and you go, English, it's not going to work. That's why I said from the beginning, I could give you the exact words, but they wouldn't work if you don't understand the principles. But you're smart. You already understand the principles of love and teach. So you're going to tell Billy simply in this tone, Billy, English. And if he then uses English words, but he still has a whiny tone, you tell him, no, that's still whine. Whine is the way you say it, and you will not respond. There's no punishment, just no response. No fish. They don't electrocute the seals if they don't clap their flippers together. No, they just feed them when they do it. Based on a certain command. I don't know how to train a seal, but a seal trainer did teach me this. You tell him that if he whines after you say the word English, because, honey, he really will. In fact, he'll test you quite a number of times. If he whines after you say English, if he whines even a little, if he whines 5%, you'll say, okay, well, you can go to your room now until you remember how to speak English. You show him the difference. You say, here's the way you did it, and here's the way we say it in English. No mocking, no anger, no irritation. What am I doing? Loving and teaching, as it applies to whining. This is just one example, remember. All throughout the training, I'm going to show you how loving and teaching applies to every other childhood behavior. It's so delightfully interconnected and simple. Now, go do this. Don't just listen to these words and go, oh, that's interesting. It might be, but that's not going to do you any good. Start it today. Wait for him to, actually, he's already I told her, he's already in the next room whining, so go do it right now. Don't even finish this conversation. That's my suggested assignment also to everybody who's listening. Listen carefully and you'll hear the whining. They're not speaking. It's any variation on that. And it gets louder and there are different tones and there are different pitches, but it's all whining. Consider it an exercise. All this information is worthless without your doing it. You'll never know how it works until you do it. You'll never know what it's like to love and teach your child until you do it. And this is a really common problem. So it'll be easy for you to find an example for you to apply this behavior to, or your knowledge to. Your child will also never know what it's like not to whine until you love and teach him or her. They never will. You essentially doom your child to a life of whining. Who would knowingly do that? So the next time your child whines for anything, do exactly what we've been talking about. First, if there's whine, you stop everything and you address it. I'm summarizing. Second, you say English. That's it. No long explanation. You don't say you're whining. Oh, boring. Parents just love to say you're whining again, which is going to lead to the child whining louder. In case you hadn't noticed that, that's a pattern. Third, after you say English, the child whines even a little. You just say, well, you can go to your room now until you can remember how to speak English. Notice it's not go to your room for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or so many minutes per year of the child's age or any of that foolishness. No, just until you remember English. The child might turn around and take 2 steps toward his room and turn around and say, and this is common, okay, English. Win. You win. The child wins. Once you've taught a principle by loving and teaching, hang on, it gets easier to teach every other principle with loving and teaching. This simple little thing that I'm sharing with you alone will change the rest of your life. For the rest of the course, I'm going to teach you how to apply it to everything else. Through everything that I say, pay close attention to my tone of voice. It's everything. If you use this tone, gentle, not pleading, not begging, not certainly whining for your, because I've seen endless parents whine at their children to stop whining. Would you stop whining? And I'm thinking, no wonder they whine. Gentle tone of voice, not impatient, firm, matter of fact, like English, informational, not harsh, not pleading, not angry. If you use that tone, which I'm using with you right now, you have begun to accept your child, to love him, and teach him. You're loving and teaching already. And now the angels sing. No kidding. It's this big. There's no punishment involved here when a child behaves badly. It's loving and teaching. This is not discipline. It's not self-restraint on your part. You're not telling or restraining the child. You're not telling him that he can't be angry or disagree with you or be dissatisfied. You're not saying that. You're not squashing this little kid's soul. You're not stopping his expression of feelings. And there's no time attached to being in his room. In other words, there's no prison sentence. He just goes to his room until he remembers how to speak English. Some kids get it 2 steps down the hall, and some kids decide to make a point and go to the room and live there for 2 days. Whatever. You just keep loving and teaching. He might even get the point that you're making with him as soon as he turns around and begins to go to his room. Great. You don't care how long it takes. This is loving and teaching. It's teaching and learning. So you don't care about the time involved. If he learns the point in 3 seconds, well, hallelujah. If he learns to use English instead of whining, everybody wins. You win, and he wins for the rest of his life, because at his age, 4, 5, 6, 19, he has no idea what the effects of whining are going to be. It'll poison his relationships. It'll poison his relationships with a girlfriend, a boyfriend. It'll poison his job. It'll poison his schooling. It'll ruin his life. Going to his room is just one of many teaching tools. It's a consequence of his choice to whine. It's a motivation. Notice, a consequence is only a motivation. If you're angry, it's not a consequence anymore. A consequence becomes a punishment. That's the difference. It's all about your tone. Again, I'm going to say this more than once. You might consider your response to whining to even lean toward the humorous. Remember that you said that he's going to his room until he remembers how to speak English. Well, the kid already knows how to speak English. So see, there's an inherent light, humorous mocking involved. A light-hearted mocking. Kids actually enjoy it when you play with them, when you gently tease them. Not mean, but gently. When you joke with them. It's certainly better than nagging, lecturing, and being angry at them. I've received many letters from parents who have said that if the parent is complaining about something to another adult after they've taught their child this method of speaking English instead of whining, if the parent is whining to another adult and the child is in the room, the child will say to the parent, English. You got to be prepared. Once you teach your child the principle, if you don't live it, you're going to hear the principle back at you. And it's only fair. Everybody in the family lives by the same true principles. Is this cool or what? Most families are run by tyrannies. Well, why do I have to do this? Because I'm the parent. Because I said so. Turns out kids are not all that enamored with that response. Everybody in the family lives by the same rules. Now, another variation on how you might love and teach a child who is whining. You can mix it up. You can say, what you're speaking right now is whine, and when I went to school, I didn't learn whine. They just taught English. So you go to your room, and when you can remember how to speak English, I would love to hear what you have to say. What's the message from the words that I just spoke and the tone of voice I just used? You want to communicate with your child. You just said, I would love to hear what you have to say. How often does a child get to hear that? They're told to shut up and stop this and do that, but they're not invited to speak. You say, I want to hear what you have to say, but I only speak English. Communication is impossible with whining. Now, there are lots of ways to talk about whining to children. The words depend sometimes on the age of the child, but the essence of what I'm teaching you is the same across the ages. The whining of a 4-year-old sounds astonishingly similar to the whining of a 19-year-old. Teaching children not to whine can be unbelievably effective if you remember 2 keys. You're going to notice this over and over again, that the number of things that I suggest to you to remember are really simple. The key to any problem with a child is you being loving. I'm going to say it again. The key to any problem with a child is you being loving. As I said on the landing page that you almost certainly had to read before you got to this sales page, when children behave badly, it is almost always a reaction to them not feeling loved unconditionally. Loved with no disappointment, irritation, frustration, or anger. So we're back to first key is you being loving. If you're not, it doesn't matter what you say. All they're going to hear is, I don't love you. I will help you, 1, to feel loved yourself. I'm going to teach you how you can make that possible. And that's not the same as loving yourself. It's a ridiculous concept that doesn't work. How to find love elsewhere for you to change the pattern of a lifetime, because most of us don't. Almost none of us do. And 2, I'll teach you then to share that feeling, love, with your child. I'm going to do that over and over again. Teach you how to feel loved, and then how to share that with them. We already did it with the whining. I showed you how to feel loved because as I taught you about whining, you didn't realize it at the time, I was loving you, teaching you calmly, not yelling at you, giving you information because I care about you. We're on the sales page. You haven't paid for a thing. And I'm teaching you the secret that if you applied it and knew how to apply it, you wouldn't need the rest of the course. But most of us do. I was loving you, and you take that love and you give it to your child. It is critical that you learn to feel loved, because when you don't, that is when you become disappointed, irritated, impatient, and angry at your child. If you feel any impatience as you say anything about whining or any other behavior to a child, you are done. There's nothing you can do that's going to be successful or effective. Your child will learn nothing, as you've already learned yourself with your own experience. You've proven that. When you get angry at your kids, does it ever go well? No. Oh, you can get them to go to bed. I mean, you can smack a child in the head and you can get them to do things, but does it go well? Does it last long? No. In a couple of minutes, we'll talk about why any indication of impatience or disappointment is deadly. This is the most important thing I'll be teaching you in our ridiculously effective parenting training. How to teach your children in a way they can hear it. What usually happens is that we teach them and they don't learn because they can't hear it in the way that we teach it. So again, the most important thing I'll be teaching you in this ridiculously effective parenting training, how to teach your child in a way they can hear it, which can only happen while you're loving them. That's why we're here. Teaching parents to love is like learning to weave tapestry. It's breathtaking and not always easy to see in the beginning. You probably don't know anything about weaving tapestry, and I only know a little bit, but they make these strings that go vertically, and that's called the warp. And then they tie little threads to the warp all over the place. Sometimes it just looks like they're doing random nothings. That's the woof, the warp and the woof. And eventually it creates the tapestry. They change colors, they change thread textures, they do them tighter or looser. It creates actually a texture to the almost effectively a painting with material. And in the beginning, you may not see what's developing, same as you might not see what's developing here as I'm teaching you about parenting. But in the end, wow, it all literally ties together. It's beautiful. The second key to teaching children about whining or anything else, remember the first one was you being loving. The second is consistency. The lack of it is death. I'm not exaggerating when it comes to teaching. I told you about the mother who called me about Billy, the kid who was whining in the next room. When she left our conversation, she is one of those brave souls, those heroes to me, who actually did what I suggested. Most people hear a new principle and they go, well, that's interesting. I'll try that sometime. They're dead. They won't try it. She went right into the next room and she did it. She lovingly and consistently refused to listen to whining of any kind, of any degree anymore. So guess what happened? Wait for it. He quit whining. After how long, you might be thinking, how long does this take? Well, in this particular mother's case, and this is not unusual, it took 2 days. Really, 2 days. Now, it's not easy in the beginning. Remember, she taught him to whine. So he did. She taught him that it was acceptable, and suddenly, out of apparently thin air, she changed the rules. I mean, hello, the kid's got to be wondering, what do you mean you're changing the rules? There's no whining. I've been whining since I was born. That's not fair. Yeah, probably not. But as a parent, learning to love and teach, by the way, you're going to hear me use that more and more as one word. I won't say love and teach. It's just love and teach because they have to be done together or it's useless. As a parent learning to love and teach, you're going to be changing a lot of rules. But look at the results. She went into the next room, changed the rules, did it. She was consistent, and the child's whining didn't lessen. It stopped in 2 days. She texted me, and she said that he had made up a song that he would sing in the back seat of the car or while he was playing around the house. Now, I can't do the justice to the melody, but here are the words. The kid would sing, I can talk or I can whine, but if I whine, mommy can't understand me. That's the song. And he'd repeat it over and over. Hysterical. I mean, really funny. Crack her up every time she'd hear it. And brilliant on both their parts. He made up a song so he could remember it on his own. Kids are not stupid. And brilliant on her part because she was loving and consistent. Complete understanding in 2 days. How old was this child? 3. If you can teach a 3-year-old to stop whining, which had been a lifelong pattern, I know lifelong, it's not very long at 3, but it's a lot of whines, then you could teach any other child of any age to stop whining. You can teach yourself to stop whining. Now, to all of you, don't even think about saying either of these two things. 1, well, but my child isn't 3. So, in other words, this example of Billy, the 3-year-old, doesn't apply to me. Or 2, but my child doesn't whine. Well, Billy's mother didn't think he whined either. I'm saying don't focus on the age or the whining, because I'm not here to teach you about 3-year-old whiners. That's a pretty limited lesson. What am I doing? I'm teaching you again how to love and teach a child. What? Anything. It applies to everything. And I'm going to show you how your child almost certainly does whine, and how that relates to every other behavior that you do recognize in your child. We'll get to that shortly. And then again and again, everything weaves together, and some patterns have to be repeated in order to seat themselves properly in the tapestry. Everything I teach you is designed to help you to become a better parent overall, and to help you become happier as you do it. Imagine being a happy parent, even when things are really difficult. Difficult to the point that in the past you would refer to them as impossible. Not with loving and teaching. So what's my assignment to you? I hinted earlier when I said, just go do it, what I did with Billy's mom. Now we're going to get to more meaty, practical, real stuff. 2 parts. First, look for the whining. You have to look for it. It's everywhere. It's an obvious sound. Your child comes to you and says, Billy hit me. Okay, well, he used English words, and yes, maybe Billy did hit him, but he whined, and we can't have whining, even when it seems justified. Well, but Billy's bigger than me, and he hit me. Well, then you stop, like we said before. You show him what the whining sounds like, and you teach him what that would sound like in English. Mom, Billy hit me in the next room. Wow. A kid can learn that in 2 minutes. No joke. And can learn to stop whining, like we said, in 2 days. But there's so much more. You assign so many more ways to whine. Like, for example, you assign a task to a child. And as he turns to do the task, this is usually with older children, they sigh. So go sweep the kitchen, they say, as they turn to go and do it, and they lumber off to do the sweep the kitchen. They convey reluctance with their body posture, or their sagging shoulders, or their head that droops. That's whining. And if you don't identify it as whining, the kid's going to continue to do that for the rest of his life. And all those people that we talked about, partners, friends, schoolmates, teachers, employers, they ain't going to like that. And he's not going to like it, the child. It's very unproductive. Other examples of whining. Why do I have to do it? I know none of you have heard that. Or all I do is work. Or I'm just a slave around here. Or Susie, pointing to his sister, she doesn't do anything around here. Whining is complaining, but with a tone. Now, if the child speaks in English and says, why am I being assigned to sweep out the kitchen? I've spent the last 3 hours cleaning out the garage. You might actually change your mind and go, I've forgotten that. Well, why don't I have Susie do it? Or you just might simply say, because somebody has to do it. But see, now we're having a conversation. I'm not giving you the answers to all of these questions your children are going to ask, although we're going to get to a lot of them. It's eliminating the whining. Why do I have to do it? That's not a conversation. It's kind of an assault. It's victimhood, and you're not going to teach a child anything as long as they're feeling like victims and whining. Second part. You heard what I said to Billy's mother about responding to his whining. Now, I can tell you that if you tell a whiner that he's whining, I'm just preparing you for this as you're learning to love and teach. You tell a whining child that he's whining, he'll almost certainly do one of two things. One, deny it. I'm not whining. Ironically, he'll say that in a whining tone of voice. Or he'll increase his whining, and the whining will get worse. And in the beginning, that might be a little discouraging to you because you hear me say, love and teach, and the whining will stop. But notice, I didn't say it will stop permanently and immediately. So what do we have to do? We have to love and teach again, and love and teach again. And as I said, the keys with you are loving, and then you are consistent. Why do kids tend to do that? Deny it and increase it. Because whining is a behavior they've learned from you. You taught them. That often gets them what they want. In other words, it works. Then they don't have to do it. If they whine enough, well, all I've done is work all day. And then you just go, oh, and you take the broom because it's faster to sweep the front porch than it is to listen to a whining child and get them to do it. It's worked for them. They don't have to do what's assigned. They get a sibling in trouble, or they just get your attention. Sometimes whining is to just get your attention. A child who has not been unconditionally loved lives sometimes just for this. Now, you're going to have to watch my face closely, painful as that might be. They live just for this. All you have to do is roll your eyes, wrinkle your forehead, anything. What did the child just learn? If he whines, he owns you. He can make you be unhappy. I have an old friend who used to say, a child would rather have a stale cookie than no cookie. And modern studies done at major universities have proven that a child would rather be yelled at, even slapped, than ignored. So sometimes they'll whine just to get you to look at them. You're going to teach them to not whine by loving and teaching them, because if you're loving, why would they have to whine for your attention? If you teach them that there's a better way, why would they use the whining way? It all interconnects. Loving, teaching, consistency, you feeling loved, all of it does. So what do if a child denies whining or they keep whining? You do not vary from the script. You show them their tone, and then you show them what a non-whining version of asking for what they want or describing a negative event might be. If they deny it, you just say, well, then go to your room, and when you learn to speak English. Do you see? Don't deal with the denial. If a child says, I'm not whining, don't respond with, yes, you are, because then what follows? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. And you look like two 4-year-olds in a sandbox. If they whine more, it's the same. Again, you show them what whining looks like, and you show them what not whining looks like. And if that doesn't work, we go to our room until we remember to speak English. Do you see how simple this is? 2 days for a 3-year-old. It'll work for your older children too. Now, the consistency part. Do as Billy's mother did. Respond as I've suggested about whining every single time. You can't miss a time because you just can't. Every single time you hear or see whining for 3 days, just do it as an experiment, as an assignment, and see what happens. You'll be shocked. I can tell you that if you don't see a huge decrease in whining, possibly elimination of it, 3 possibilities are likely to be certain. 1, you are not consistent. You let some whining slide by. If you do it even just a little, that's letting it slide by. Why would you do that? Why would you let some whining slide by? Now I'm defending you. Well, you're used to it. You may not even have noticed it. Whining has just become normal in your household. 2, you're used to it, so you don't even label it correctly. The kid does the job you assign, but clearly hates it. You think that the goal is to get the kitchen swept. No, It's to love and teach the child, and teach the child lessons, feelings that will last for the rest of their life. So if they sweep the kitchen while they're whining, you miss the point. Third, it takes effort to stop whining. We all tend to avoid effort and conflict as much as possible. So we just let it go by. Or you were just tired. You thought to yourself, do I have to go through this again? Yes. In order to be, if you want to have a happy child, if you like whining, no, you don't have to go through this again. If you think carefully, you can think of times that you let the whining continue. More than 3 seconds of you waiting is too long. Second thing that's likely, you were irritated. You sighed, you rolled your eyes, you used a harsh tone of voice, a glare, all that stuff that you hate and your child hates, or the stuff that you hate when your spouse or your boss does to you, you do to your kids. If you're irritated or impatient in any way, they will not learn the lesson. They will keep whining because they hear, I don't love you. And whining is a response to that. Simple. Notice it's all interrelated again. Or 3, you did one or both of these things and you're in denial. It's really easy to convince ourselves that our children are not doing the things that are just killing them. It takes work to get those things to not just change or stop. That's not your goal. Your goal isn't to stop whining. Your goal is to love and teach your child so they'll be happy. That's the goal. During our ridiculously effective parenting training, we'll be talking about children of a wide variety of ages who do all kinds of things, who are angry, who argue, who in hundreds of ways are difficult and frustrating. Children who have ADHD, children who are depressed, withdrawn, suicidal, cutting themselves, children who are addicted to gaming, to their smartphones or other electronic devices, children who are addicted to alcohol, drugs, porn, or indiscriminate sex, children who are irresponsible, who are failing in school, who are refusing to do chores, who just resist anything that resembles responsibility, children who are dangerous to others, who hit their siblings, who get in trouble at school, and more. Although whining is just one of many subjects we'll be discussing, do you know what all of these kids that I just described verbally and with the slide, do you know what all these kids have in common? Ironically, and I didn't intend this when I started this discussion, they all whine. They're all connected by whining. Often, we just don't recognize it. Why? Because it's so common among kids and their friends and other kids we know and amongst adults. Turn on a political television talk show and you can listen to adults whine 24/7. It's become our baseline tone to whine, and we've passed it on to them, so they do it. It's become normal. Once an unproductive behavior has succeeded in becoming normal as in the norm, it's pretty easy to not notice it anymore. Or we don't see whining because we call it something else. We might call it complaining instead of whining. You find me a kid who doesn't complain and send me an email. They all complain because they see us complain, because everybody complains, because their friends complain. Cartoon characters complain. Everybody complains. When they don't get what they want, what do? They complain. They might in the beginning complain in English, but then they learn that whining gets them more of what they want. So that's why they whine. So if you have a child who complains, you'll need to know everything we'll be saying about whining. What we don't see is that whining and complaining are all cries for help, for the unconditional love that we're going to learn to give them. Another reason we miss our children whining is that we call it something else like arguing, which is still whining. Pay attention to the tone. Still all cries for help. So as part of solving arguments with a child, you'll need to know everything that we've said and will be saying about whining, including what to do about it, because they're all related. Or we miss their whining because we call it anger, which is really just loud whining. Insistently, on steroids. These kids who are angry are screaming for help. All children's outward problems are interrelated. They're tied together, as are their responses to their problems, to their pain, to their not feeling loved. So as part of solving anger, you're going to need to know everything that we'll be saying about whining and what to do about it. Again, I'm just showing you the relationship between whining and everything else that kids do. They are related. Or you may not see your child as whining because they're just depressed or they're withdrawn in their room. You don't ever see them. That's just very quiet whining. Or they started off by whining and it didn't work. You didn't pay attention to them. So they gave up and now they're just depressed. Or they're cutting themselves. Or they're threatening suicide. It started with whining and they're still whining. They're just doing it quieter and they don't do it with you because you didn't listen. So as part of solving depression or cutting or suicide, you're going to need to know everything about whining, which we've already talked about. Or they're addicted to games, phones, drugs, alcohol. You don't see the whining because it's been silenced or hidden by the addictions to behaviors or substances. Children often stop whining when they're playing games, which we supply, like as in video games, or when they're texting on phones that we bought. Although if you read their texts, you'll discover that they're whining in their written word. They don't whine as much when they're stoned or drunk, which they've seen us do to eliminate our pain. So there are so many ways that we miss the whining that was there in the beginning, before it was silenced by all of these addictive behaviors. So again, as part of solving all these addictive behaviors, we need to know about whining. As I talk about approaching whining, pay attention not so much to the details of the 3-year-old. Remember, I said that we'd be talking about principles and then just illustrating them with specific problems and ages. We'll be talking about lots of ages and lots of problems, and they all interrelate. But what I'm saying here about whining will give you a feel about one of many problems, along with hope that there are practical and relatively immediate solutions. And you'll be learning what you need to know to become a more loving person, which is essential to and must precede you becoming a loving parent. This isn't going to be a training about whining. I've said it before. Whining is just one tiny illustration of one symptom that feeds into, multiplies, and interrelates with every other symptom or problem children have. We're going to show you how to put all this together for your child, yours. This all applies to you. Where we tend to go terribly wrong is that we often describe certain unproductive behaviors as the problem. We even label certain patterns of behavior as disorders or syndromes or diseases. Parents are often thrilled, I've seen it on many occasions, it's kind of a strange thing to see, to learn that their child's behavior has a name. They even celebrate, like when they learn their kid has ADHD and they go, oh, whew, now we don't have to do anything. We just give the kid a pill. Now they don't have to do parenting. But this is fatally flawed thinking. It's wrong. It would be like describing most diseases in trees as brown disease. Because in the end, the leaves tend to turn brown, when the truth is that brown leaves are really just a symptom or an end result of a great number of underlying causes like drought, insects, viruses, and so on, even winter. But psychiatrists and psychologists do this all the time, where they label disorders according to the symptoms. Oh, he has brown disease because he behaves in a certain way. They're describing the behavior instead of describing the underlying cause. They say a child has ADHD as a set of symptoms instead of identifying the root cause, which could, in rare occasions, be neurological or even infectious, or far more likely, but rarely identified, could simply be caused by the pain that comes from a lack of what a child needs most: to be loved and taught. The lack of that causes more ADHD than all the other causes put together. And we'll talk more about that, very specifically ADHD, later. In the short term, and eventually in the long term, human beings by far are driven by pain and need and fear. So why not label their behaviors in that way? Well, we will, over and over, until it makes sense to you and helps you address the pain, need, and fears of your child, because those are the root causes of the behaviors that cause you and them so much trouble. Pain, need, and fear. Those are the problems. And they all originate from a lack of, surprise, unconditional love. The behavior is not the problem. But we think so because the behaviors that follow the real cause are simply more visible than the cause. You don't see emotional pain in a child. You see the whining and everything that follows. Just like brown leaves are more visible than the tiny virus that causes the brown leaves. And the behaviors themselves also cause additional problems. For example, a child without sufficient unconditional love, the beginning cause of everything, or what I call real love, a child without that, the real cause, might lash out in anger. That's the behavior. That's the reaction. This anger pokes the underlying emptiness of the parent, who is then even more impatient and irritated with the child, who then becomes angrier or withdrawn or suicidal or turns to alcohol or drugs or whatever. But it all started with the absence of love and then went to anger, and it can just spread out into myriad symptoms like the branches of a tree. All because we missed the real cause of the anger. And then we label the whole cycle as angry child, or oppositional defiant disorder, one of my favorites, or borderline personality disorder, or depressed, or cutting, or detachment disorder, instead of the more accurate term, wait for it, a child who's unloved, who doesn't feel loved. We're not blaming anybody. We're not blaming ourselves as parents. We're not pointing fingers. We didn't know how to unconditionally love our kids because we weren't unconditionally loved ourselves. Meaning, without impatience or irritation or annoyance or anger or rolling of eyes or any of that, most of us have never seen unconditional love in our lives. Unwittingly, in fact, every time we refer to a behavior as a problem, we confirm that the behavior is the problem. And so we continue to dismiss the real underlying lack of love. A few moments ago, we talked about Billy, who whined a lot. The world is filled with Billies, raising their voices in various ways. But for a moment, let's stick to whining. Occasionally, parents will say to me, as one did just the other day about a whining child, "I tried what you said, but it didn't work." I responded, "You did not do what I said." With an indignant tone, the parent said, "Well, how do you know? You weren't there." And I could just hear that tone being used with the child. I said, "Because I have yet to encounter a case where the parent has consistently done what I described as a response to whining, which I just told all of you, loving and teaching, where the child has continued to whine. If you implement these simple principles, the whining and all the other behaviors you're looking at stop. Why? Because our kids are too smart for that. They've all learned not to do what doesn't work. Two corollaries. Kids whine because it works. When it doesn't work anymore, when we don't throw them a fish, they quit it because they go, not consciously, well, that doesn't work. Just like I don't hit myself in the head with a hammer for a headache because, well, it doesn't work. You'll never see me do that. You'll never see anybody do that. They do what works. They do what gets them what they want. Children do not continue using behaviors that don't give them a reward. So you just have to remove it. If you don't consistently throw a fish to a seal, he does not climb up on a box and naturally clap his flippers. That's just not a behavior that they use in nature. Now, a brief but very important comment about all of this. While you're dealing with whining in a child or any other unproductive behavior, if you are either unloving or inconsistent, you'll lose. If you're angry, you lose because all your child hears is, I don't love you. We talked on the landing page you read just before this about this subject, and we'll talk more about it in chapter 1. If you listen to the whining half the time, or even less, if you're inconsistent, in other words, they'll keep doing it, and you lose again. Just know that whining and all the other problems of children are not cured by clever words or intimidation or yelling or nagging. The solution is all in who you are, in what your children feel from you, the love they feel from you. You can see it in your face. Your face will change as you learn to love them. It's in your tone. It's in your posture. It's in your energy. That is what we'll be doing in the ridiculously effective parenting training. I will, 1, teach you how to feel loved. And number 2, teach you how to love your children unconditionally. And 3, teach you how to teach your children how to feel loved, to be loving, to be responsible, and to be happy. Addressing whining is just one of dozens of ways that will accomplish that. I will teach you many basic principles, and then I'll use them to solve the specific problems that you've already had or will have or are having right now. But that's just the beginning. We have a website just for parents who are in this parenting training or who have taken it at realloveparents.com. But it really comes down to this. What would you be willing to do or sacrifice so your child could be happier right now? And so you could be, for that matter. Let me tell you a story about a woman that I knew years ago. She had 2 children who were 6 and 8, and they fought all the time. I could hear them fighting in the next room no matter what time of day I arrived. They were disrespectful. They were entitled. They had trouble at school at 6 and 8. She said, what can I do about them? So I told her I was very specific about exactly what she could do to help her children. But she didn't do it. She didn't learn how to feel more loved herself. She wasn't consistent. She pretty much did nothing. Their behavior worsened. She asked me again. I gave her the same answers. And again, she took no action. Now, I rarely get this direct, but I knew her well. And knowing her family background, I said, you can do what I'm suggesting with them. It's up to you. It's not going to affect me. Or in about 10 years, you'll be calling me to tell me that one of them is in jail. 9 years and 6 months later, pretty close to 10 years, she called and asked for help getting her oldest son out of jail. Too late for me to help. But she then spent tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees. The child still went to jail, and years later, he's still there. Now, I'm not saying your child's going to go to jail. I'm not trying to scare you. But children in pain will react in terribly unproductive ways, in ways that will plague them for the rest of their lives. They might go to jail. They might become addicted to drugs or alcohol. They might fail in school. They might not be able to get a job. They'll have children with without adequate training and without a job, and demand that you help finance and babysit the kids. They develop mental health problems. They wreck their car and ask you for yours. They become entitled and impossible, and you end up raising them until you're dead. It goes on and on. Here is likely the best chance you'll ever get. Make a decision to experience the miracle of unconditional love and teaching in your family. You deserve it. So do they. Transform your life as a parent.